Good afternoon. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive, and welcome to our weekly Westchester Update briefing, where we will talk about COVID and some other issues of the day. I will be joined in a couple of seconds by our Deputy County Executive, Ken Jennings. We have arranged our program to cover a couple of different points and then deal with probably what is the overarching issue of the day. I have under other circumstances, would have viewed this morning as a very happy morning. I am a loyal New York Ranger fan, and the Rangers won a very tough series coming from behind to beat the Pittsburgh Penguins, and in Ranger land, Ranger fans are extremely happy. I was also very proud as a resident of the city of Rye to see that a young man made his Major League debut. He was pitching against the New York Mets for the Seattle Mariners, George Kirby, who's of a prominent family in my home community. So that would normally be a source of happiness. But what happened in Buffalo this weekend is a source of great sadness and a great concern. And we want to address that, but I want to address that after we cover the basic issues that we want to discuss today. And then we'll talk a little bit about what happened in Buffalo and what it means on a broader level than just the incident itself. I'm going to ask Ken Jennings to join me, and we're going to go through COVID numbers and where we stand as we start the process. I'll ask Ken to touch on weather-related issues, some information about our MetroCard van. We'll talk briefly about our budget, and then we'll talk about the incidents in Buffalo. First of all, there's no question that we are now in another surge of COVID. We had hoped that COVID was behind us. I think most people felt that when the Omicron surge weathered out at the end of January into February, that we were past the worst of it. And so many of us, including Ken and myself and others who got COVID during that period of time, had very mild symptoms or no symptoms at all. And it really felt as we were heading to the warm weather, we'd be outdoors and we would see a drop in the infection. That is the exact opposite of what's happened. And while we were hopeful that we wouldn't see this and call it a surge, it is clearly a surge. The numbers most recently, as of yesterday, Sunday, May 15th, middle of the month, 5,476 active cases of coronavirus in Westchester County. That compares unfavorably. A month ago, April 15th, there was 3,047 cases, and if you go back just 2 months, to March 15th, 966 cases. So we have seen now a five-fold increase in the number of active cases for coronavirus over the last 60 days. That is not good. And we had looked at, in a positive light, the lack of increase in the number of hospitalizations as at least being a positive indicator, and that too is no longer a good number. We have 113 people who are hospitalized at the present for COVID. A month ago, that number was 57, and 2 months ago, that number was 30. So we've had almost a four-fold increase in the number of people hospitalized. There is the reality that at 113 people, we're well below where we were in the peak of Omicron, where we were almost at 700 people hospitalized. We're well below the maximum number of hospital beds, so that is not an issue for us in Westchester. But the fact that the increase in infections has also given us an increase in hospitalizations tells us that it's not just the frequency of the disease, but some degree of the severity. The fatality numbers have still been at a moderate level. Every fatality is a tragedy. We lost 2 people in the last week. A month ago, we lost 2 people that week. The month before that, we lost 5 people in the week. And those numbers are relatively small compared to when we had a much more robust fatality set of numbers. But again, to anybody who lost a loved one, if you were one of the 2 families or friends in the last week, then that is a tragedy of incalculable proportions for you and for your family and the loved ones. But that increase now has us assessing our various policies, and at this stage of the game, working off of CDC recommendations and the State Department of Health recommendations, we are not taking any mandated actions at this stage of the game. We have not declared a state of emergency. We are going to try to avoid that if we can. We hope to see a flattening out of the infection numbers, and the numbers don't continue to rise as they have over the last 2 months. The communicability level of this disease right now is determined to be high, and that is reflected in how quickly we have ascended from less than 1,000 cases to over 5,000 cases in just the space of 60 days. The CDC and State Health Department advises us as individuals now, not government action at this point, wear a mask when you are in public indoors. the likelihood of spread indoors is much greater. Wear a mask indoors. Stay up to date with your vaccinations. So if you are now triple vaxxed, if you've had the first booster and you're entitled to have the second booster, consider how recently it's been since you've had the most recent shot and determine through your medical doctor if it's appropriate for you to have the fourth shot. And also, if you have symptoms, get tested. Don't assume that you're okay. That assumption may infect you and others around you on the basis of what you think you might be. And certainly take additional precautions if you know you're in one of the high-risk categories. If you have underlying health issues that you're aware of, COPD, diabetes, any number of different diseases that make you more vulnerable to the COVID virus. And then also if you're of a certain advanced age, not just senior citizen age, but further advanced beyond that. You'll need to take those steps to protect yourself from this and your loved ones from this. And that also applies to people that you are close to who fall into those categories. If you have an aged relative, or if you have a relative that you know has an underlying health issue, be concerned about how you interact with them with masking and with your vaccination precautions. The concern that we have continues that this disease is not, unfortunately, behind us. However, we still intend as a county government to go forward with our various activities and programs, and we reserve the right, as I said, both in good days and bad days, we reserve the right to create certain parameters for us to enjoy those opportunities. I've mentioned that we'll be opening our beaches the last Friday of the month, Memorial Day weekend. We open our pools a month hence, which will be the last Friday in June. We have now our ethnic festivals actually began this past weekend with the Polish Heritage Festival. There are more that are coming. And we will look at creating some rules that hopefully will help reduce the spread of the disease. But at this point, no mandates yet. We hope not to have a mandate, but we will be prudent and we will look at what happens to determine what the next steps are. On the testing front, free testing remains available at the Westchester County Center in White Plains for symptomatic members of the community. That's if you've had a known exposure to the disease, that also entitles you for the free testing there, or if you have another specific reason. It may be access to other people who are vulnerable. That is a series of free testings at the county center over certain specific days, Monday and Tuesday, 8 to 4, on Wednesdays from 8 to 12, on Thursdays from 8 to 2, and on Fridays from 8 to 12 noon. All of that information is available on our website, westchestergov.com. Hopefully we've included some of that in the scroll underneath the video, and they can show it again before the end of this. The CDC recommends being tested 5 to 7 days after an exposure. You would have had to have known when you were exposed, and this is all very much guesswork. Do the best you can. Now, at-home testing is easily available now. We had a big difficulty accessing at-home tests back during the Christmas holiday season. That now is almost 6 months ago. There's plentiful testing available for at-home purposes. You can buy them from the store. We are still distributing them when authorized to do so by the state, try to give them out to senior citizens and other appropriate areas so that you can test. And by testing, you will do one of the necessary actions that will help you go forward. We are planning to resume our dialogue with schools. Now, schools still have another month and a half of classes. We're right about at the end of their season. We intend to engage with school superintendents as we have during the heart of the pandemic to determine how they're handling it, what kind of outbreaks may or may not be happening in the school setting. It is the state of New York that has the authority to direct schools. It is not the county government. We work with the schools as a cooperative partner through our health department. We have not had any recent satellites at any elementary schools or middle schools. We certainly can do that again in our dialogue with the school district to determine if that will be helpful to them. We have not reinstituted a mask mandate inside county office buildings. That is an option on the table that we will consider if we think that will be helpful. When we had it in place for about a month, from mid-December until mid to late January, we were able to avoid having any outbreaks inside any of our county facilities that we have the control over of our facilities. So that gives you a sense of where we're at for the moment. We look to see whether or not the governor or a superior authority in Albany makes any decisions. But for right now, COVID is on the rise. Test, so maintain social distancing and hand sanitizing. This is a 2+ year experience now. And make sure if you have been exposed to have not just the at-home testing, but come to the county center, get the PCR testing, and let's see if we can prevent you from spreading the disease to your loved ones and to your other contacts. But COVID is still with us, unfortunately, and we're going to have to continue to focus on it. We do want to mention a little bit of good news. Everything can't be doom and gloom. We have just received a report from our budget department that shows that Westchester County's fiscal status is in very good condition for the 2022 budget. We know that members of the press have contacted us relative to some COVID-related questions, so I'm going to ask our Director of Communications, Catherine Chaffee, to join us for any press questions that we have relating to COVID. As we touch on the other topics, they're less oriented to having that kind of questions and answers. So,
Sure.
Catherine Chaffee, any questions?
Yes, so the first question is from Gary Stern from the Journal News. He asks, with Westchester's transmission rate now high per the CDC, what does it mean for schools? Will the county recommend that masks be worn inside schools? Should school districts suggest it, as Scarsdale has done?
Well, Gary Stern from the Journal News, the state has the authority to authorize any actions at the schools. The county does not. The county is a partner to assist the schools in whatever either the schools determine to do through decision of school board or whatever the state might impose. And at this point, any individual school district may have some particular restrictions in their district, but it's not a county decision to make. We do intend to reach out to the school superintendents and have a dialogue in light of exactly this, which is the rise in the cases. There is about roughly 6 weeks of school left until graduation time, and what the schools do and how they determine to do it, we will certainly be helpful in any way we can. I think the masking structure, though, that seems to make sense at the moment is for those individuals, whether they're children or adults, that have a compromised immune system, that have some underlying health issues, should go back to wearing masks as individuals. To make it a universal requirement would really be an assessment that a school district would make in lieu of there being any top-down decision from the state. The county is neutral on such things, but we are going to look at whether or not the vaccination numbers are high enough, and we tend to think they're not high enough on the pediatric side, and we will be in dialogue with school districts to determine if we can open up some satellite vaccination sessions that would be helpful. I think what we have seen is that even as the rate of transmission is high, the rate of severity is less so where you have a highly vaccinated population. Westchester in general is a highly vaccinated population, but it isn't quite the same for the under 18 age category, and certainly those under 12. So at this stage of the game, no particular directive from the county, no directive at this point from the state, and we will work to try to get through additional vaccinations and determine what policies might be appropriate. Other questions?
The next question comes from Dave Wolf from News 12. He asks, with COVID numbers going up in the county and the CDC recommending we mask indoors in the county, what is the county planning to do?
Well, we're discussing and trying to take a look at whether or not we want to go to the next step. The county can unilaterally establish an indoor mask requirement within that property that we ourselves control, county office buildings and other county functions, indoors at this stage of the game. Because our pool, our parks, beaches are all outdoor facilities, we haven't gotten to the point to do that, because obviously when you're outdoors there's less likelihood of virus spread because of the open air and the air movement. We're going to determine whether or not we're looking at a trend that's going to continue upward, and then we reserve the right to take action within that property that we have. Masks on buses will continue. That is an option on our part. The federal government has opened up the transportation routes, but we have made it still mandatory on Beeline buses, so that portion of our program is in effect, and it is optional at the county airport at this stage of the game where we have the ground responsibilities. If we take action, it will probably be along the lines of what happens at the airport, what happens within county office buildings and facilities, and then masking requirements for our recreational facilities. Those would be the different steps the county would look at. We're not prepared to do that yet, but if we do, we'll certainly announce it. And if we determine that it warrants a state of emergency announcement, so we have the authority to do some additional things, we will do that. But at this point, we're not there yet. Any other questions? No other questions. Very good. Well, that's on the COVID front. Let's touch on a couple of other issues while we're together. I mentioned that we have gotten a report from our budget department that analyzes the closeout of the 2021 fiscal year, which ended December 31st, and then also the first quarter of the 2022 fiscal year, which ended March 31st. It takes a certain amount of time to get revenue from the state and sales tax and other areas that they indicate. So we are now in mid-May, just looking at the closeout of the first quarter as well as the end of last year. The news fiscally in Westchester County is very good. We have a very significant surplus, a rainy day fund, if you will, and just like a person who has a strong savings account, you have that in order to handle unanticipated expenses. Should something happen where you need to dip into your savings, that you have a robust savings account, you haven't spending yourself down to the point where it's paycheck to paycheck for survival. So having that is very important. Any of the new spending programs that we put into the budget that we adopted back in November and was passed in December have to be sustainable over an extended period of time, or understood to be a pilot program that has a certain expiration date. All of those things we think are prudent activities, and it's reflected in what we think is a stronger bond rating. Now, the bond rating agencies make their decisions on a once-a-year basis. We are now on a stable outlook at a AA plus or AA2 level. Those things are very important to us because it reduces the amount of money when we go to the bond market to fund different projects, and we get a favorable rate, and we know that our bonds are being picked up rather quickly by investors. That is all good news, good fiscal news. We did not have that situation when we walked in the door. When we walked in the door at the beginning of this, a little over 4 years ago, we had a bond rating that was in the process of being downgraded. The fiscal policies, when analyzed by Wall Street rating agencies, were that we were sort of burning the furniture for firewood in order to keep an artificial freeze on property taxes, when in fact we had not stabilized our resources. We were doing things such as paying for ongoing expenses by bonding, whether paying certiorari payments or pension payments that are due every year. When you bond for that, that's like going and get a loan to paint your house. You're going to pay the loan back over 10 years, but you're going to need to repaint your house before the 10 years are up. So you're really, sort of kicking the can down the road. Those are some of the practices we inherited, and we have changed those practices, and we're getting the respect for that fiscal policy. We also had an early separation program that we implemented in 2020. That helped us reduce our expenditures rather significantly. I've mentioned many times before the renegotiation of extension of contracts, Liberty Lines, Wheelabrator, and a couple of other revenue streams. And then also the sales tax revenue, which has come in much stronger than we anticipated, strong enough in order for us to suspend bus fares over the course of the summer. So all of these fiscal policies are putting us in the right foot. And I know that sometimes people look at fiscal policies as assuming it's a matter of your political party affiliation or your ideology. And I know that both Ken and I, who we both served as chair of the Board of Legislators at various times, we've been in public office, but what people don't appreciate is that Ken worked for some major corporations, including one of the top accounting firms in management, and one of the major technological firms, and I had experience with major companies, subsidiaries, Nestle, ITT. So we bring into these jobs not just our party affiliation, but also what we learned in corporate America about financial understanding and planning. So we see a very good report at the end of the first quarter. We look to see what the trends are in the society. There are issues happening on a much larger scale than we are, issues that relate to inflation and what the monetary policy is. No county controls that. That is controlled by the Fed. That is controlled in Washington, D.C. But for where we are in Westchester County, we feel as if we're in a good shape, and that is a bit of good news on the budget. We will have more news at upcoming updates. We'll talk about our economic development efforts. We'll have Bridget Gibbons join us here to talk about that. In the immediate here and now, we want to talk about weather. We have some severe weather that is now at hand, so Ken will cover that. And then also what we're doing for our MetroCard customers and how we try to get that out there for people so they have easy access to buying MetroCards. Even if you're not paying on the Beeline bus for the next 3 months, you still have to have a MetroCard to access the New York City system. So, Ken Jenkins.
Thanks, George. And certainly, again, the credit goes to the leadership of County Executive Latimer as we've been getting through these particular scenarios. And as he noted, there's a lot of times people just don't look at the things in front of them, and not recognizing the great skill and intensity and understanding of how to get to where we are now. It wasn't by accident, and County Executive Latimer's leadership is what got us to this great position as far as our finances are concerned. But going into the weather, it's going to be some severe weather that we have coming into Westchester County. So it's a strong cold front that's coming in today, and it's not just going to have severe thunderstorms. It's also talking about potentials of some tornadoes that can happen in the area, and that's going on from this afternoon into early tonight. Our Department of Emergency Services is closely monitoring the forecast and will absolutely have the staff and resources available that will coordinate with all of our local municipalities as we are trying to prepare everyone to get together. We always remind people, the county executive reminds people, to whatever our parents, our mothers specifically told us to do as far as traveling in weather that could be severe, to make sure if we could have a full tank of gas, make sure that we have water in the car and certainly batteries and flashlights and be available for that. Make sure you're taking your time. If you're driving, drive slowly, and certainly do not go through any standing water. That is certainly a recipe for disaster that could happen if you see a blockade, if you see the sawhorses or a roadway is closed. Our normal suspects, the bodies of water, bodies of parkways that have bodies of water in their name, the Bronx River, the Sawmill River, the Hutchinson River, or the Sprain Brook. All of those have places that are known to have low-lying areas and that are usually places where flooding occurs. Make sure to take your time through that. Again, do not go through standing water. If you have any of the lawn furniture out, I know we had some storms on Saturday, but Sunday was an absolutely picture-perfect day, and that allowed people to put some of their lawn furniture out. Make sure you tie those things down to make sure they're not flying around and causing additional damage. Again, that is going to go from this afternoon into early this evening, and they are severe thunderstorms that are going to come through our area. Please govern yourselves accordingly. Later on this week, as we know, and the county executive mentioned again, that we are having free bus fare, which will start on June 1st, that will go through September 6th. Well, the Beeline buses are going to be free in Westchester for many of our individuals traveling, specifically going into the city that have to transfer to the MTA places. You still will need a Metro card. So the Metro Card van will be here in Westchester and going around Westchester County throughout the next couple of weeks. The van is actually staffed by the MTA, New York City Transit Authority, and their customer service representatives will be there and will be happy to answer any of the questions that you have. Once again, if you get on a Beeline bus, a lot of people are so used to doing those free transfers to the MTA. Because our Beeline buses will be free until September 6th, that will cause you to have to still use your Metro card to pay for the MTA buses when you get there. So MetroCard is certainly the regional system. It's getting replaced by the OmniCard, but it has not completed that here in Westchester at this particular time. You visit the MetroCard mobile sales van for help on any of the following items: reduced fare applications, submission of the damaged or reduced fare MetroCards in exchange for a temporary replacement, reports of a lost or stolen MetroCard, or any other MetroCard inquiries, again, while they're transitioning to the OmniCard. The MetroCard will be here this week, May 16th, through May 20th, again on May 25th, and that means they'll be at our Salute to Seniors event, which will be happening this Wednesday and the following Wednesday. With that, we'll turn it back to the county executive. George.
Thank you very much, Ken Jenkins, our Deputy County Executive, and along with Joan McDonald, Emily Saltzman, Andrew Ferris, Catherine Chaffee, John Nona, I'm very fortunate to have quality leadership to help us as we go through this, now our second term running Westchester County government. Over the weekend, there was a story that really became the overarching story for all of us, and I mentioned earlier, the joy that I have as a sports fan rooting for the teams that I root for. Really was washed away by the impact of what happened. And I thought about it first and foremost in an everyday terms. You look at what you might be doing on a Saturday, as most of us would. There are certain chores, and if you work the normal Monday through Friday week, you have Saturday to do some of those chores. And those chores could be going to the post office, going to the bank, perhaps. If you need dry cleaning, going to the dry cleaners or laundry, If you do laundry at home, you can do it at home. I remember being single, not having laundry equipment. I had to go out to a laundromat to do that. That was a Saturday task I had to do. It took all day when you try to access machines and so forth. You might have some work to do on your car. You might cut your lawn. You might do a few things. One of the things that's been a staple on the weekend is to go grocery shopping. It's one of those many tasks that you sort of have a mindless check off, and you have your list and you go grocery shopping. And a couple of days ago, in the Jefferson block area of Buffalo, a number of people did just exactly that. They went grocery shopping. Geraldine Talley, age 62, went grocery shopping, and so did Celestine Cheney, 65 years old, devoted grandmother. Haywood Patterson, a 67-year-old dedicated churchgoer who would drive people to and from the supermarket. Andre McNeil, 53 years old. Margus Morrison, 52 years old. Roberta Drury, 32 years old, who had moved to Buffalo to be with her brother, who had a bone marrow transplant. Catherine Massey, 72 years old, a community activist. Pearl Young, 77 years old, who dedicated her Saturdays to working in a soup kitchen. Ruth Whitfield, 86 years old, who had just been to visit her husband in a care home. On that day, they were shopping. They went to the local supermarket in their neighborhood. It's a Tops supermarket. That's not a chain we see here in Westchester County. We have other chains here. I happen to have a residence in upstate New York that we will get away to every so often, and they happen to have a Tops supermarket in that community. They're prominent in parts of upstate New York. And I happen to have in my wallet, you do too, no doubt, cards that represent places you go. I have a Speedway gas card because I gas up at Speedway. CVS card because I'll find myself at CVS every so often. And I have a Tops grocery card for when I'm in that section of the state and I go to local Tops. So except for the fact it was a different part of the state, Warrensburg, not Buffalo, I might too be at a Tops supermarket on a Saturday with those individuals grocery shopping, doing whatever it is that you do to pick up food and vital material for your family. On that day, they picked the wrong day to go to Tops supermarket. They picked the wrong day, not because of anything they did that was wrong. It just so happens that fate picked that day to send a young man by the name of Peyton Gendron to that particular Tops supermarket. Peyton Gendron, as far as we understand, is an 18-year-old boy who lives in Conklin, New York. And if you want to know your geography of New York State, Conklin is a suburb of Binghamton. Those of us who live in this area think that all of upstate New York is within 5 miles of each other. Conklin and Binghamton is about midway between New York and Buffalo, so it's about 200 miles from there to here, a little less, and about 200 some odd miles from there to Buffalo, slightly more. And I'm sure you have, I know I have, driven 200 miles, 300 miles for any number of different reasons. It's a healthy drive, 3 hours, 3.5 hour drive. What you think about on a 3.5 hour drive could be literally anything. I play the radio. If there is a sporting event on the radio, I will turn the radio on. I have my Bluetooth, and I will no doubt bother Ken Jenkins on the phone or bother Joan McDonald or maybe Lisa Reyes or somebody on the team to talk about things while I'm going through a long drive. And Peyton Gendron, 18 years old, borrowed his father's car to take a drive. And the drive took him 200 miles. That's a long trip. And over that long trip, he thought about what he wanted to do with great intensity. And if you've ever been on that part of the state, it's pretty flat, it's pretty wide open. You go west out of Conklin, out of Binghamton, you go through Owego, Elmira, you go through Horseheads, name of a community. You find your way going through Corning and up to Bath. And then if you're heading to Buffalo, you usually take Bath, you go north on an interstate to just south of Rochester and Henrietta, and you continue west. It's a long drive. It's a lot of time to think. And what Peyton Gendron thought about was how he was going to kill people that he did not know. Those people turned out to be Pearl Young, Catherine Massey, Ruth Whitfield, Andrew McNeil, Celestine Cheney, Haywood Patterson, people that he did not know personally. Their crime, in the mind of Peyton Gendron, is that they were black, or African American. And they lived in a zip code which has a concentration of African American population in the city of Buffalo, 200 miles from where he lived. You might ask, Was this young man ever denied a job that was given to somebody else, which stoked his anger? He was a paper boy and worked in a deli. He hadn't been cheated out of some job that he thought perhaps somebody took from him. Did he not get a seat in a college that he was somehow denied of that would stoke this anger? No. His anger was stoked by what he read on the internet. Now, the internet is free speech. The internet will provide you whatever type of information you want. If you want to read about the New York Rangers and the Pittsburgh Penguins, it's there on the internet. You can read it. If you want to read about how to fix your car, you can get information on the internet about that. And if you want to learn about how to modify an AR-15 weapon, you can find that on the internet too. There's a lot of things on the internet, and we prize ourselves in America believing in free speech. And with free speech, people can say what they want. They can express their opinions and their ideas. It's free. It's free. And on the internet, social media, more so than ever in the history of America. Free speech used to be you could stand up at a public meeting and say your piece, or you could stand on a street corner and say your piece, but now you can, by email, by Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, any of these different platforms, you can go off and say whatever you like. And here's the thing about free speech. It doesn't have to be true. It just has to be what you want to say. And it has to be whatever you want to read and whatever you want to expose yourself to. And you can expose yourself to great literature. You can expose yourself to art. You can expose yourself to any ideas that are out there. And some of those ideas that are out there are ideas of hatred. How you, at the tender age of 18, can formulate a plan to murder people 200 miles away from where you live because you believe that there is a theory of how a 67-year-old, a 72-year-old, a 77-year-old, and an 86-year-old shopper in a supermarket plans to replace you and your race. The Great Replacement Theory. There's been a lot of theories that have been offered under the guise of America. Declaration of Independence, written by Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, great men, flawed men. All of us are, certainly they were, but they wrote and put in the public domain, now on the internet. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that we are endowed by our Creator with basic, inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That too is a theory. We have had men and women in this country who have stood up and expressed their point of view about what America is. During the closeout of the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln, in his great second inaugural address, at a time when brother was fighting brother and near the end of a bloody war that claimed 700,000 American lives on both sides of the Great Divide, with malice toward none, with charity toward all. At a time of war and hatred, brother to brother, malice toward none, charity toward all. That too is a manifesto. We have to ask ourselves, what is it that we expect this country to be? Do we want it to be a country where an 18-year-old Peyton Gendron can read things on the internet that are patently untrue and act on it, have access to a weapon legally bought, travel into another person's hometown, walk into a grocery store, shoot and kill people in a parking lot, shoot and kill a retired Buffalo police officer who was serving as a security guard. That security guard returned fire, but he was already wearing body armor. He knew what he was there to do, and he had plans to continue on beyond that to a second location. This isn't the first time a tragedy has happened. Adam Lanza in Newtown, Connecticut, walked into an elementary school and he shot 5-year-old children. Whatever his perceived reasons were, there are no reasons that could possibly serve any defense. We will talk about this and express our pain for the people that died, and we should, and we must. I talk about even one COVID death being a tragedy. And when you have multiple deaths, it's a magnitude tragedy. But it's a tragedy if a building collapses. It's a purposeful murder if you drive 200 miles with a semi-automatic weapon, perhaps modified to be an automatic weapon, so that you can kill people who are shopping in a Tops supermarket. I would love to be happy today. I'd love to tell you that the fiscal strength of this county is better today than it was 5 years ago, and it is. I would love to tell you that my team is going on to the second round. But I can't tell you those things as if those things matter more than the hatred of an 18-year-old boy. Based on what? What made you get in that car and drive 3.5 hours, every one of those miles, thinking about what you would do when you arrived on North Jefferson Street in Buffalo? America is interpreted by all of us who are Americans. I have lived not quite 70 years, and there was a lot of America before I was born, and there'll be a lot more America when I'm gone. But this is an experiment. It's an experiment where freedom is granted all of us because the Founding Fathers believed that it was a natural right from our Creator, not given by the state, not given by the county executive, governor, president. It's a natural right that you have to be free. If the color of your skin is black, if the color of your skin is brown, you've been given a natural right by your Creator. And we believe that you have the right to life and to liberty and to the pursuit of happiness, and the pursuit of happiness in a way that doesn't infringe upon other people's life and liberty and pursuit of happiness. As a crime story, he has been captured. He will face prosecution, and if found guilty, he will face punishment. Nothing brings back Pearl Young, 77 years old. Nothing brings back Ruth Whitfield, 86 years old. Nothing brings back those little children that died that day in Sandy Hook. That's an open wound that never heals. It never heals. It never will heal for those people. They had to tear the school down because just the sight of the school and the location of what happened that day could not stand as a remembrance for people. We are about running a county government, but we are also about believing that we can govern ourselves, that we somehow can shape the better angels to be more dominant than those demons and devils that do drive individuals. And since none of us are perfect, we're all flawed, we all do things at various degrees that are not right, not proper. And if we are faith, we understand what those things are. We come to a moment of clarity, and we're penitent, and we ask for forgiveness, and we try to be better. And we certainly, if we have a 3.5-hour drive, we think very carefully about what we're about to do. This country is a great country. It's the best country on earth, and if this country were to fall to malevolent forces, this world would be in grave trouble. We are the great shining light in this world. We've been given that opportunity, and we've been given that responsibility. And that responsibility comes with it, an introspection, and then an action that comes out of that introspection. What do we do to try to stop the patent gendrons of the future? Because right now they're out there reading the internet, and the internet will put out there the works of Shakespeare and the works of white supremacists, or for that matter, hatred of any sort. Hatred against Asian Americans, hatred against any religion, anti-Semitism, anti-Catholicism, any hatred that's out there, and the free speech is there. How do we find the better angels if we want this country to survive in the years to come? And there are players in this world They would very much like us not to survive. They would very much like for us to tear ourselves apart. They would very much like for us to have what I'm told is called a boogaloo war. A boogaloo war between people who hold extreme views on the right and people who have views on the left, and they have it out. And the end result would be a long, dark night for all of us. So we pray for those we've lost. We hope that whatever our theology teaches us, that they are at peace, that the final act of their life is not the definition of their life, that they were good and loving people, and that the good that they've done lives on after them. We hope that whatever amounts to justice will be done on the assumption of guilt, prove it, that this young man will have many years to contemplate the evil that he's done, and that we will find the right combination of law enforcement, moral teaching, education, mental health services that will try to prevent this from happening again. But it was only a month ago that a fellow named Frank James started out in Milwaukee, went to Philadelphia, and drove a van into Brooklyn, went into a subway station on a subway car, dressed in military fatigues, put out a bomb to confuse the vision of people in the subway car, and then started shooting in the car. By the grace of the Almighty, didn't someone not die that day, and not a lot of people die that day. We don't realize just how lucky we were that day. But we have to determine what kind of an America we are and what kind of an America we're going to tolerate, and how much longer we're going to cuddle and coddle people whose basic philosophy is hatred, people whose basic philosophy is kill them because they don't deserve to live. Wasn't that what Adolf Hitler's message was all about? Get rid of the inferior people in the world. Get rid of the people that threaten you when in fact they don't threaten you. Defenseless people put in boxcars. Wasn't that what pogroms were about? Wasn't that what slavery was about, to enslave a group of people so you benefited from it? I'm very proud that our finances are good. I'm very proud that in Westchester County our crime is down. I'm very proud that we have fixed capital projects, Playland and other places to improve. But I'm not very happy today knowing that Peyton Gendron could get into a car, borrow his father's car, and drive 250 miles and kill people who are grocery shopping in Buffalo. I'm not very happy with that at all, and you shouldn't be very happy with it either. I'm George Latimer. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back with more information as the week continues. Be safe.